And I am so pleased for another opportunity for us to have an engaging conversation about the issues that are pressing in our community. As a part of this church, we understand our role here is not just to speak to particular issues, but to every issue that affects our community in a holistic manner. So I want to invite you today to share this video because we have a wonderful guest here in our midst. We have our state's Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, a wonderful man who has had a relationship with this church and a relationship with this community for years. He is one who has served as a representative in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, as well as someone who is serving in this present capacity. And I'm excited to say that he's one of Montgomery County's own. He was on the Board of Commissioners as well before becoming the Attorney General, and he's now in a re-election bid as well for his second term. So we're excited that he took the time to even be with us today. We're excited that he took the time to engage our conversation and engage our chat. So make sure you press the share button. Let everybody know what's going down right now in this hour. I'm going to turn this over to our beloved pastor, Pastor Quan, and he will open us up with a word of prayer, and then we will continue in our conversation.
Our gracious and glorious God, we thank you for this day and for the blessings that come our way. We thank you for this opportunity to have this conversation. So we ask, oh God, you might give us your shalom, your peace as we engage. May, oh God, everything that comes out of our heart and mouths give you glory and honor and praise. And may your people be edified through this conversation today, we pray. Amen. First of all, let me thank our Attorney General, Josh Shapiro. As Reverend Tripline has indicated, he's no stranger here to Bethlehem. He's been a blessing to us. And we have watched him as he has elevated to this high position as Attorney General. We are just grateful to God for the relationship we have with him and for his commitment to serve people of all walks of life. His life is a testimony to what it means to love God and serve people of all walks of life. So again, we welcome you here today and grateful that you're here in our prayers, that you will continue to have the shalom and peace as you travel throughout this state. Today, we want to talk about some issues that affect all of us, particularly some African Americans who are leery about voting. And I have been one who has stood in line to vote, and whether or not I can feel comfortable or others can feel comfortable, no matter what their ethnicity, in terms of sending their mail-in ballots. Can you answer that?
Well, first off, Pastor, it's wonderful to be back here. It's great to be with you. It's great to be with you. And I feel like this is home for me. So I thank you for always making me feel welcome. And I think this conversation is an important one because fundamental to our democracy is people power and people participation. And here in Pennsylvania, historically, the way you participate in the election was to show up and vote on Election Day. And then in 2019, the laws changed, which gave us the ability not just to show up on Election Day, Tuesday, November 3rd, but to be able to vote early at one of these satellite election boards and to be able to vote by mail. And there's been a lot of noise around vote by mail. A lot of it really has come from the President of the United States, alleging that it's fraudulent, alleging that your vote won't count, alleging that it won't be tallied maybe the same way as if you vote in person. Well, I'm here to tell you as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, whether you vote by mail, whether you vote at an election board satellite center before Election Day, or whether you vote on Election Day, whether you send your ballot through the mail or drop it off in a drop box, your ballot will count. And I'm working overtime to make sure that your ballot, your vote is secured, protected, and counted. Now, we have had, unfortunately, some litigation, some lawsuits filed by the President of the United States to try and make it harder for people to vote, to try and do away with vote by mail, to be able to bring poll watchers in from outside of your community, inside of your community, which really is a concern in black and brown communities across Pennsylvania. The good news is we've won every one of those lawsuits. The allegations that the president has put forth have been tweeted about a lot, but in a court of law, we deal with facts and evidence, and the president has failed to produce the facts and evidence to do away with our laws. So my message to everyone here at Bethlehem is vote. Don't let somebody take away your power. Be a part of defining the direction of our Commonwealth and our country. And whether you vote in person on November 3rd or vote before that by mail, your vote will be secured, protected, and counted. I have confidence in that, and you should have confidence in that.
I know this is the first time you are meeting Reverend Sean Tripline, and indicated earlier that he's now serving as our youth pastor, and in a few months he'll be serving as our assistant pastor. And I believe this is the first time in a while he's been able to vote in Pennsylvania, just moving from New Jersey. So he may have some questions around this whole process of voting. Reverend Tripline, can you just raise what your concern may be?
Absolutely, Pastor. You know, I am a Pennsylvania voter, and even when I lived in Jersey, I came back to Philadelphia. This is my first time voting in the county. All of the elections I've been a part of since 2006 were in the Olney section of Philadelphia. But one question I have, not only is this a new process for me, and I made the personal decision that I want to stand in line on November the 3rd, even though I'm encouraging anyone and everyone, please send in your ballot. Before then, if that works for you, make sure you have a plan. I guess my question as it relates to those who are sending those ballots ahead of time before November 3rd, can you just kind of speak to this issue as it pertains to the envelopes that the ballots are supposed to go into? I understand that there is a secrecy ballot that individuals are supposed to put their actual ballot into, and then another as well. Can you just open that up and let people know what that process looks like and what's at stake if they don't follow those rules?
Yeah, let me do this, Reverend. I'll take you from sort of start to finish if you want to vote by mail. If you want to vote by mail in Pennsylvania, you request your mail-in ballot. You can do that online, or you can show up at a early action center, a satellite election board center, and you can apply for it and get it right in person there. The ballot will arrive at your house a few days later if you request it online. And I would encourage people to fill it out right away. With black or blue ink, fill in the circles next to the names of the people that you believe are best to lead our Commonwealth and our country. After you've completed that, you fold up your ballot. And then there is this white, basically plain white envelope that is inside there. That's called the secrecy envelope. And you have to put your ballot inside there. It's the law in Pennsylvania. Now, some people think that that's a silly law. Some people think it shouldn't matter. But the reality is that's what the law says, and that's the way the court has interpreted it, and you got to put the ballot inside that secrecy envelope. The idea behind it, of course, is we want your ballots to remain secret until ultimately they are opened and counted. After you put it in the secrecy envelope, then you take the entire contents and you stick it in the outer envelope. You sign the back, you print your name, you write the date, and then you have two options. You can either mail it back, and it doesn't require a stamp, or you can drop it off in a drop box. And there are a number of different places where you can drop it off around Montgomery County. And perhaps, Pastor, you'll put that on the website so congregants know exactly where they can drop it off. You drop the ballot off, you put it in the mail. And then folks are going to say, geez, my vote's really important. How do I know if they got it? Well, you can go on the Department of State website and track your ballot. It'll tell you if your ballot's been received. So I voted by mail about, a week or so ago. I was able to, and I put it in a drop box, and I went and checked the Department of State website, and it showed that I received my ballot, and it showed that my ballot was then received back. And so I have the confidence now in knowing my ballot's there, it's in the system, and it'll be counted on Election Day. So that's how we go about voting by mail. Someone said to me the other day, a woman named Megan from Pittsburgh, because I was explaining the whole secrecy ballot, and some people have heard this term naked ballot, which sounds really silly, but what that means is you've mailed your ballot back naked. You didn't put it inside that envelope. So this woman, Megan from Pittsburgh, said to me, "You're making this too confusing." I said, "Okay, well, how would you explain it, Megan?" She said, "Think about a wedding invitation. You know how it has that extra envelope inside? That's all this is." And you know what? She's right? I mean, you get those wedding invitations. I've always thought there's like this extra envelope. Why is it there? And now we know, right? And so if you think about it as a wedding invitation, I think it makes a little bit more sense to folks. But the idea behind it, of course, is we want it to remain secret. We want it to remain secure until ultimately it's counted, and that's the way you vote by mail.
Both of these individuals have heard me talk so much about yourself, and I'm just delighted that Dr. Jennifer Stewart is here. As I indicated, she's doing her field work here as a student at Palmer Seminary, and I'm sure she is eager to vote, and I want her to be able to ask a question that's on her heart. So, Dr. Stewart, can you just...
Hi, Doctor.
Hi. Well, first I wanted to thank you for taking the time out to discuss with us a little bit about voting. And I'm going to be voting by mail because of the coronavirus epidemic and things like that. But for those that are going to be voting in person, and you mentioned this a few minutes ago about President Trump indicating that there might be poll watchers when people are going to vote. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how individuals can be more comfortable in voting in light of the president's remarks?
It's a great question, and I want to kind of walk us through this. First off, anyone watching this, if you want to find out where your polling place is, go on the Montgomery County Election Board website. I know they also mailed you a letter to say exactly where your polling place is, so make sure you check that out. Here's the deal. In Pennsylvania, since 1937, we have had a law that defines the conduct of poll watchers and specifically where they can come from. And the law says you must come from the county that you reside. Put in simple terms, if you want to be a poll watcher in Montgomery County, you got to live somewhere in Montgomery County. You don't have to necessarily live in that voting district, but in Montgomery County. Why do we do that? Because elections are local affairs, right? And you want to walk up to the poll and you know your neighbors, and there's, you know, it's nice to see them and it's comforting to see them. And this law has existed, as I said, since 1937. The president has actually sued us here in Pennsylvania to try and upend that law and say that you should be allowed to bring poll watchers in from anywhere in Pennsylvania in order to monitor elections. While poll watchers' conduct is specifically governed by statute, specifically governed in terms of what they can and can't do, I still don't think what the president's doing is right. It's certainly not legal, and we beat him in court on that. What he's really trying to do, I think, is intimidate voters, especially black and brown voters, in their communities by bussing in these poll watchers from somewhere else. Folks who don't come from our neighborhood, folks who don't know us. And I think that is very dangerous, and we put an end to that. Now, an outgrowth of that has been people feeling as though they'll be intimidated at the polls, that folks will be there kind of bullying them or getting vocal with them. That's against the law. And if we find anyone doing that here in Montgomery County or anywhere in Pennsylvania, law enforcement will respond. And I'm working with my law enforcement colleagues and coordinating a lot of this activity from the local, state, and federal level, so that if there is an incident, the proper authorities will respond and they will deal with it swiftly, so that everyone will have a peaceful opportunity to go and to cast their vote. We think that is critically important. We won't stand for voter intimidation. That's against the law. And we will make sure that all of the laws are applied, no matter who you're poll watching for, no matter who you like, no matter who you support. We simply won't allow that type of violence or intimidation to take place at the polls. The last thing I'll say is this. There has been some people who have said, we'd really like to have police pre-positioned at the polls in order to keep us safe. And then there are other people who say, we don't want police pre-positioned at the polls because that will make us feel intimidated. A lot of different opinions on that. Here's the deal on that question, because it's an outgrowth of this broader issue. Our laws do not allow law enforcement to be pre-positioned at polls. Certainly, if there's some sort of incident, they can respond to that. But our laws specifically prohibit law enforcement from standing outside of polls. Obviously, if a police officer is there in uniform to vote, that's fine. But there to keep the peace is not. The president said not too long ago that he was going to deploy sheriffs and U.S. attorneys and attorneys general to stand outside the polls. Not only can he not do that, it's against the law. And that type of rhetoric is just so reckless and scares people and makes people worried. And my message here today to you, doctor, to all of you watching at home is you have nothing to be afraid of. Make your plan to vote, whether you vote by mail or whether you vote in person. And law enforcement and other, county election officials and others are working together to make sure that's a smooth process and a safe process.
So one of the questions I have that I'm constantly hearing is, on November the 3rd, will we get the election results from Pennsylvania, or will it take several days? And the next is, what preventions are we taking for some kind of crisis that may occur, even though it's safe, in potential of not only violence, but in terms of questioning the results of the election?
In terms of how long it'll take, you're going to have tallies from the precincts, which you should know by, midnight or so, roughly. And then you're going to have all of these vote by mail ballots that have to be processed. In Montgomery County, that number could be somewhere between 250 and 300,000 votes. And it'll take some time to run those through the machine. But what you're going to know by the early hours of the morning on Wednesday is the general kind of framework of what the precinct vote totals look like and what the outstanding mail-in ballot numbers are and the party breakdown of those outstanding mail-in ballots. So you'll know, for example, in a county, if there are, I'm giving you a hypothetical, if there's 300,000 outstanding mail-in ballots and 70% of them are Democratic ballots, doesn't mean that all 70% voted for Joe Biden, but there's a pretty good chance they did. And so while you're not going to know the specific numbers for a few days, you're going to have a very good sense, I think, in the early hours of the next morning as to what the framework of this election looks like on a statewide basis. It's going to be a little harder as you get to more of the local races, your state rep race or something like that, particularly if it's a close race. But I think you're going to have some pretty good broad strokes by the early morning hours.
Are there any provisions in terms of how one may contest the election?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Pastor, you also asked me about, sort of, are we prepared for anything that might happen after? The answer on the preparation is yes. I've had a team working on this since the summer. We are in court right now, defeating Donald Trump's efforts to undermine our laws here in Pennsylvania. We have a team that's prepared to keep things peaceful on Election Day, together with our other law enforcement partners, as we were talking about before. And then we have a team that's prepared for whatever may come once the polls close. And I think we have some thoughts on what may come, and we're prepared. And I think, the public can be confident in knowing that we're on this, that we're ready, and that we're taking care of things.
Can you also talk about the Electoral College and the popular vote? Because the last time in 2006, the Democratic candidate won the popular vote but did not get the electoral vote. Can you just explain that to?
Yeah. My 9-year-old asked me to explain the Electoral College yesterday to his class. I did my best, so I'll try and do it again here. In counting the votes for every other office but president, you win the election if you get one more vote than the other person. Certainly that'll be true in the Attorney General's race. I hope it doesn't come down to one vote. Hopefully it's a little bit broader than that. But that's how it works in every other race. For president, what happens is it's effectively a state-by-state contest. And if you get one more vote than the other person in that state, then you win that state. And then the question is, well, what do you win when you win that state. You win the state's electoral votes. What's an electoral vote? Each state has one vote per federal representative. So every state has 2 senators, and then here in Pennsylvania, for example, we have 18 members of Congress. So 18 plus 2 is 20. So we have 20 electoral votes in Pennsylvania. That's why Pennsylvania is such a prize. That's a lot of electoral votes. And so if you get one more vote than the other person for president, you win all of the electoral votes of the entire state. That's why you hear sometimes in the media the road to 278, right? The 278 is the number, or 270, my apologies, 270. That is the number you need of electoral votes to get to a majority and win the presidency. In the last election, Secretary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump did, but wasn't able to win enough states to piece together the necessary 270, again, my apologies, 270 electoral votes in order to win the presidency. So that's why when people are talking about, the sort of overall popular vote, that's less important right now than making sure that in the key battleground states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, that the candidate of your choice wins those states, because that's sort of the states that can go either way, that have a big number of electoral votes and can put one or the other candidates over the top.
This matter of voting is so crucial, even to the people of God, and I don't want people to feel as though that we're taking sides, but I do believe when we look at the value of the vote, it's really important that everyone votes. And I know, as you indicated, that those who are trying to intimidate, particularly minorities, African Americans, not to vote, but it's so crucial. So much is riding on this election. And as I sit here with these 2 younger persons, just concerned again how they feel about some of the areas that are troubling to them. So could you speak on that behalf, Reverend?
Absolutely. This issue of electoral college is an interesting issue, and I think that a lot of people at home have questions as to why that is the system. And I know that part of the history is, it's pretty much an archaic practice, dealing with the North versus the South, the differences in demographics in the early formation of our country, and whether or not that should be revisited is a conversation that's been had, especially in the last 4 years after Secretary Clinton lost the election despite winning the popular vote. Whether or not there's bipartisan support for reforming that is probably a different conversation. But what I would like to know, as it relates to what we can change and what we can look at on a state level, is our voting practices and the access for individuals to be able to vote. Can you speak to just the nature of what those voting practices are in Pennsylvania, in terms of whether someone needs to bring a driver's license, or whether or not a signature is needed? There's some variance between what happens here in Pennsylvania and California and other states across the country. So can you just give us an overview of what those laws are here in this state?
Well, this is an election where there is really unprecedented ballot access, in that you can vote by mail, as we talked about before, or you can vote on election day, or you can go to one of these election board, satellite offices. That's a good thing. We want more people to participate in our democracy. In fact, there was a real push for voter registration. And in the last election in 2016, there were roughly 8 million registered voters here in Pennsylvania. Today, that number stands at 9 million. A full 1 million more than was the case 4 years ago. That's a good thing. We want people to participate in our process. Now, there are some that wanted voter ID to be, required here in Pennsylvania. I and others fought back against that, because I believe it was designed to disenfranchise certain voters. And the good news is that's not the law in Pennsylvania. You do not need to show ID when you show up to vote, except if it is your first time voting at that precinct. But even then, you don't need to bring a driver's license or any of that. You could bring a utility bill just to show that, you live there. The idea is this is your first time showing up there. We talked before about your neighbors kind of running the election. They might not exactly know who you are. The idea there is that, you just show that you live there. And even if you don't provide that, kind of proof of residency, if you will, they'll still let you vote via provisional ballot while they go and reaffirm that you live there. So, the idea that some wanted that everybody's got to bring an ID, that's not the law in Pennsylvania. You do not need to bring ID. You just need to show up, sign your name, cast your ballot. The other thing I would just point out, pardon me, I'm sorry, Doctor, real quick on this. This will also be one of the first elections in Pennsylvania where there is a paper trail. For a long time, people were anxious because you'd be, pressing the computers and you weren't exactly sure. Now you're going to fill out, kind of brings back bad memories of the LSATs and all that, but you fill out the little bubbles, it gets scanned in, and your vote gets recorded. And if for some reason something happened, say with the computer system, I don't anticipate anything like that, but if they did, all the ballots are inside the machine. So you have not only the paper trail of the mail-in ballots, you got the paper trail of the ballots that were cast on Election Day. That's a good thing for our democracy.
I see Dr. Stewart with her mic up, so feel free.
So certainly we are in an unprecedented time in our nation. We have civil unrest, racial unrest, we have politics, and we have COVID-19 that we are grappling with. How do you think that those things are going to impact voting rights as we move forward in this election and in subsequent elections?
That's a great question. I think it's all intertwined, and I think it's all related. And let me explain what I mean by that. You mentioned COVID, and obviously, God willing, everyone watching at home, stay safe, stay healthy. I miss the days of a packed crowd here, getting to see the pastor dancing, in front of everybody. That's a special thing. I'm smiling under my mask. COVID has laid bare so many inequities in our system. The people who couldn't get access to health care, the people who couldn't get tests. By the way, thank God for the Black Doctors COVID Testing Coalition. They've done incredible work, and Pastor Mitchell, just really great work. But they couldn't get tests. They were dying at much higher rates because they had underlying health conditions because they didn't have access to health care for so long. Many of them do now thanks to Obamacare, but for a long time they didn't. And at the same time, so many of us were hunkered down at home, working from home. A lot of people of color were told, you got to go to work. You're essential. And not only do you have to go to work, the employers weren't providing them with proper PPE, weren't paying them a proper wage for the conditions they were working in. And it really just kind of, again, laid bare so many of the inequities in our system. Layer on top of that, the killing of George Floyd. I use the word killing on purpose. Under the knee of a Minneapolis police officer, while other police officers looked on. And that, to me, sparked, even more of a conversation, a righteous conversation, about the injustices that exist. So this time it wasn't about the injustices of health care or the labor market, but this time it's about the injustices within our criminal justice system. And now, layer on top of that, the efforts by the President of the United States to make it harder for people to vote. And I'm conscious about not getting political here in this, in this church, but there's a reality that this guy has gone to court to make it harder for people to vote. And so when you put all of that together, it speaks to the real work we still have to do as a nation. I think a lot of women felt that, boy, it's been 101 years since we got the right to vote. That's done. We've We've addressed that, and then all of a sudden this guy comes along and trying to make it harder for some women to vote. Or blacks who, people literally fought and died for blacks to have the right to vote, and he's trying to undermine that. A lot of these battles that we thought we sort of fought and won, and when I say we, obviously it's my ancestors' ancestors, and others, but the battles continue. And we got a lot of work to do. And I, for one, believe that even if we change the occupant of the White House, that doesn't solve these problems. It just means that we've got a better shot of being able to come together and work on them. And so, at the end of the day, Doctor, my view is this: it all is connected. And the way we get ourselves out of this is by voting, is by working our tails off, as I'm doing as a lawyer and as you all are doing as spiritual leaders and active and engaged in your community and everybody at home. You just got to make a plan to vote. And you got to take the first step to begin the healing process in this country and to begin to work to address COVID in an equitable way and deal with the inequities in our education systems, the inequity in our criminal justice system and all of this and that. But it only happens when we vote. And that's where we've got to focus our attention over these next 12 days.
As I listen to you, I am really grateful that somehow God allowed our journey to connect. And as you sit here and express your heart, not just as a candidate for Attorney General, but more importantly, as a human being who has a deep regard for people of all walks of life. Long before you became Attorney General, I knew you as a man of God of faith and your commitment to make a difference in our world. As recipient of the Martin Luther King Award, and how you have moved in this community and from commissioner and always keeping people at the heart of all you do. And I say that with all sincerity. I deeply appreciate your integrity, your faith, and your commitment to make a difference. And because it's not political, I speak that I wish for you the best in every avenue of your life. And as we talk about this upcoming election, as we talk about Black Lives Matter, as we talk about the voting process, can you just speak a word about, can we trust the Supreme Court, as conservative as they are, and what happens when we stack the deck to have all conservative justices sit on that bench?
Well, first off, thank you for the kind words, and thanks for teaching me a lot along the way. I've enjoyed such a special relationship with you that has helped me grow as a man and grow as a public servant. So thank you, and thank you for putting me in a position where I can. And I don't mean like a government position. I mean a position as a man to be able to understand different things that I'm not sure I had the capacity to understand when I began my journey in public service. And I appreciate that very much. As to your question on the Supreme Court, look, if Judge Barrett becomes Justice Barrett, she has a different worldview than Ruth Bader Ginsburg. May God bless her memory. And there's no two ways about it. It's going to be different. It's hard for me to forecast what the world will look like over time if Justice Barrett is on the court. And if she is sworn as a justice, it would seem that she'll be there for a long time. As it relates to this election, I would hope that as conservative justices, and there will now be 6 of them on a 9-person court, they would respect the view that states make the laws on elections, and states administer elections, and that states are responsible for running the process and setting, whatever the rules are. It's actually something known as the Purcell Principle that governs this. Historically, conservative justices have been unwilling to kind of step on the toes of states and allow states to manage their own affairs in this area. Obviously, the term states' rights has a horrible history, but it's something that conservative judges have always latched onto and have always relied on as the sort of foundation for their judgments. It, of course, would be ironic if now they would turn that on its head and ignore the role that states play in running our elections, setting the terms, doing the counting, and what have you. So I can't predict what they will do. If they hold true to their conservative values, they should respect the will of the state. And I can tell you that I am going to continue to do everything in my power to make sure that every single vote here in Pennsylvania that is legal and eligible is secured, protected, and ultimately counted, and that the will of the people is respected. And I say that with experience. The president has sued us, we've battled him in court, and we've never lost. And the people's vote has been protected. And we will continue to do that even if something makes its way up to the Supreme Court of the United States.
I'm always intrigued about this whole process. And again, I don't want to monopolize the time. I know they have some questions. But can you tell me what I've heard over and over again from this president, that he's not willing to commit to the fact that if he loses, he will leave in a peaceful manner? Can you put that into some kind of understanding?
No, I can't. I mean, to have a president of the United States directly contradicting tradition and norms and saying things that undermine our democracy, it's outrageous. We learned last night from the FBI that we have foreign government interference in our election. Something we all know. You don't have to be in law enforcement to know that. We know that. And we have a president of the United States who still won't acknowledge it, and instead aids and comforts our enemies. It's hard for me to explain his irrational, illogical, and oftentimes illegal behavior. Here's what I do know. If the will of the people across the country, both the popular vote and the electoral college vote, as we talked about before, if that clearly demonstrates that Joe Biden is the winner, I think the government will do what it needs to do to move on from Donald Trump, even if he is kicking and screaming on the way out.
I kind of want to reverse the order and give Dr. Jennifer another opportunity to ask the question.
So we see so much from the president's tweets and other information, social media, news outlets, so on and so forth. How do we get accurate information about voting and about the issues that are at play in our nation today?
Well, you definitely don't get it from his Twitter feed. I'll tell you that much. And you probably aren't going to get much from watching whatever he has to say in the debate tonight. Break it down this way, right? We have talked today about the process of voting. And if folks at home don't want to take my word for it, they can go on the Pennsylvania Department of State's website, or if they're here in Montgomery County, on the Montgomery County Voter Services website, to understand the nuts and bolts of how to vote. As for the issues, obviously they can go to the candidates' various campaign websites. I would encourage them to consult real news sources, not just simply what shows up in their Facebook feed. I think it's important that people seek out the news from trusted and reliable sources. I know that I have those that I trust and rely on, but I'm not going to tell folks who they should trust and rely on. They've got their own views, and they can look at that. The one thing I would respectfully counsel people to do is, if you have a view that's more liberal, take a minute to read the more conservative position as well, and vice versa. Good to understand what people are saying on all different sides. Good to see through the noise and understand what a candidate is really going to do, or in the case of the president, what he's actually done. And then form your own judgment. My sense is, with 12 days to go, and about 1.5 million Pennsylvanians who have already voted, people have mostly made up their minds. Now it's the process of actually getting those votes in. And so I'll return to what I said at the top, which is go on the Department of State's website, go on the Montgomery County Board of Elections website, and make your plan to vote today.
Reverend Tripline?
Yes, you mentioned that the Electoral College obviously is our focus as we vote in this election and every election on a presidential scale. My question, and before I ask the question, my statement that is independent of our Attorney General is that our focus is whatever your political party is, whatever your preference is, whatever ideology you subscribe to, our goal is to win the state of Pennsylvania. Our goal is to have one more vote, and then those electoral votes will then be added up to 270 one way or another. So our votes matter. Our votes are counted in this process, and everything is building up to what the states will be doing on its own individual levels. My question, though, those electoral votes, I believe Pennsylvania has 20, I believe.
Correct.
Okay. Those electoral votes, I've heard in the last few years this term floated around called faithless electors. Is that a real threat in Pennsylvania that of those 20 votes that not all of them would be allocated to the winner of the election?
No, it's not something people need to worry about. If Joe Biden gets one more vote than Donald Trump or vice versa, each candidate has a slate of 20 electors. I happen to be an elector for Joe Biden. I was an elector twice for Barack Obama. It's an unbelievable honor. And in December, you travel to the state capitol here in Pennsylvania and across the country, and you cast your ballot for the candidate that won your state, by the one vote or however many it is. Then those tallies, in this case, it would be, let's say under the hypothetical Joe Biden won, 20 votes for Joe Biden, 0 votes for Donald Trump. That then gets communicated to the U.S. House of Representatives, where it's ultimately read into the record, and then that affirms who the next president of the United States will be. That's how the process works.
Well, this is incredible because I didn't know that I was sitting next to an elector when I
Right.
asked that question. So you get it straight from the source. So if I hope I'm not getting into too much insider information, but are you suggesting that there are a total of 40 potential electors and
Precisely.
20 have been assigned to either major candidate?
That's precisely correct.
Oh, I've learned something.
And basically, each candidate picks their 20. And so Donald Trump has his 20, Joe Biden has his 20, and then whoever, when the final numbers are tallied, whoever's got one more vote than the other guy, their electors then travel to Harrisburg to cast those votes.
Something else I want to bring up because I think it's so important, not only in terms of our voting, but also make sure that we take the opportunity to run for election ourselves. I think of Reverend Dr. A. Simon Riggins, who served as a very important part of the national ministry of American Baptist churches and felt the need to do something, and he ran for mayor of First African American Collegeville. I have always valued the voting process and was blessed to be a delegate for Barack Obama twice, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden. And I just believe
we hung out together.
Yes, we did. Yeah. But I think again the importance of not only the presidential election, but our local elections and things of that nature. And I think again that your commitment to pull people along with you is something that I admire about you. Val and others, you have kind of just passed the mantle on to them, and I really appreciate that. And can you tell us a word about the importance of not just voting, but making our voices counted in our, state, local elections as well?
Pastor, I've said here on the pulpit before, I've quoted from Talmud, the Jewish teaching, that no one is required to complete the task, but neither are we free to refrain from it. And I explain that what I think that means is that everybody's got a responsibility to get off the sidelines, to get in the game, and to do their part. For some of us, our part means running for office. Others, it means being engaged in other ways. But for me, it has always meant having a position of public trust where I could help the public out. And when I see people in the community doing their part by running for school board or township commissioner, whatever the case may be, to try and help others, I think that's awesome, regardless of their party or regardless of, their views. I may not like their views, but I'm grateful when people get in the arena. And for me, I've always felt that part of my job, because people helped me along the way when I got started, part of my job was to help others along the way and mentor them and help them find their voice and their platform to be able to do their good work. So there's any number of state reps and county officials and others who are out there that I'd like to think I helped and mentored along the way, and now they'll go out and do whatever they think is best, right? And that's the way I think leadership works, and that's what I think we all need to do to help do our part going forward. Pastor, I could never do what you do, but your role that you play, even though you don't have an official government title, is unbelievably important in our society to solving problems, right? The doctors that are helping treat people right now, unbelievably important to help people in our communities. My kids' teachers, right? I mean, there's a whole litany of people that are off the sidelines in the game doing their part to help others and make our society better and stronger. For me and the people I've helped along the way as mentors, it happens to be in government, where I think I can have, that's my highest and best use to do the work that needs to be done to repair our world. And I take that very seriously.
We share so much in common because, again, my thought process and my heart is that I would bring somebody else along with me. Mm-hmm. And others have helped me to get where I am. I'm not here by myself. And so as you sit next to Reverend Tripline, my heart is that that same kind of mentoring will be with him and Dr. Jennifer Stewart, because I do believe when God takes us to another level, he wants us to bring somebody else along with us. And so I am certainly appreciative of your heart and your care. I know so many people you've invested in. We don't always say it enough, but we appreciate all that you're doing. And because this is a forum which we're not able to endorse any particular kind, I want for you the best. And I believe that the best is yet to come. You have a bright future. And I know that you're not in that chair because of your own self-interest, but you're there because God has given you an opportunity to make a difference, not only in our state, but our nation and our world. And I'm appreciative of individuals like yourself who don't forget where they started and reach back and help somebody else. And so, and you're always accessible no matter where you sit in Harrisburg. I have access to you, and I simply appreciate that. I try not to call you with every little thing, but I always keep you in prayer about everything. And so I appreciate the contribution you're making to our state, to our country. And I know I'm not alone, that so many things, and people may not know this, but beside being the Attorney General, you are a wonderful husband and father, and I've watched that journey continue as well. So we just want you to know how much we appreciate you, how much our prayers are with you, and how much we need you as you continue to lead this state and as you continue to seek to make a difference in the lives of people. So I'm looking forward to the time when we can continually have our Martin Luther King service, or times by which you can come back to Bethlehem and speak to the people as a whole. But we will continue to lift you up every day and know that God has given you the opportunity to make a difference in this world. And you're doing that. You're doing that. And so I marvel at how God is using you and how others are being affected by yourself, and particularly as an African American. And when we rise, we bring others with us. And so I know my journey is one by which I thank God for the people who have invested in my life. I'm going to give you a book. It's not where you start, where you finish, to talk about my own journey. Rabbi Marks wrote a word in that book as well. And I thank God for how we are connected together. Part of what we're doing here at Bethlehem is to be a church that embraces inclusion and diversity. So yes, we are predominantly African American church, but at the same time, we are a people that embraces people of all walks of life, not just from a political standpoint, but from our spiritual thrust in God. So I want to give these two individuals a time to give some closing remarks and to thank you for themselves, but they may also have a pending question that may be in their minds.
Thank you, Pastor.
Yes, wonderful. This has been a wonderful hour, and I really appreciate your willingness to answer these questions and to be thoughtful to this community in this way, which you have been, not just in this conversation, but there's a long trail of legacy in terms of your relationship with this church, with Salem, with Pastor Marshall Mitchell there, and many others. So we thank you for that. One question, it's really a two-part question. The first part comes from the chair of our trustee ministry, Darren DeVoe. He wants to know what is your motivation? Why do you serve in the capacity of Attorney General? And I want to just kind of add to that question. You've been in this role for 4 years. I'm curious to what has changed for you in terms of your outlook on service and this particular capacity in which you serve. Not loaded at all.
No, not at all. We have another hour here. Yeah, I mean, it goes back to a lot of the stuff the pastor and I've talked about today and over the years. It's my faith in my family. It's the way I was brought up that, you have to serve others. And it's the way we're raising our children and the example I'm trying to set for them. And so it's how mom and dad raised me. It's what I've learned from my faith. And it's what I feel is the most important thing I can be doing in life is serving others. Over the last 4 years as the Attorney General, I have seen, just the worst of humanity, right? You see violent crime. You see people's lives being destroyed by drugs, gun violence, children being abused, the most vulnerable in our society being taken advantage of. You just see horrible things every day. And I'll be honest with you, that really got me down. The first 6 months on this job, I really had a hard time with that. I stayed awake so many nights. I was literally just exhausted because I couldn't sleep, because I internalized so much of this. And it was really hard to deal with. And then I began to kind of alter my outlook and say, okay, these horrible things exist in our society, but the people of Pennsylvania have actually given me an opportunity to do something about it. And, to protect those kids or to help that senior or to stop that gun violence or whatever the case may be. And you begin to look at this in ways where you say, okay, I need to be able to kind of mentally figure out how to deal with these horrible things, but, in terms of seeing these horrible things, but recognize I've got this gift, which is I can stop some of this bad stuff. I can let the world know that there were thousands of children abused at the hands of predator priests in the Roman Catholic Church, and not just help those children who are now adults, but stop that from happening again. We can hold accountable those pharmaceutical company executives that are poisoning our neighborhoods with heroin and fentanyl because people got addicted to their opioid products in the first place. I can do something about that. And so it really helped me. You asked me how I've changed and evolved on this. It helped me realize the sort of power is a weird word, but I don't mean power. I mean that in the sense that you can do something for somebody. You're in this unique position at this unique moment in time where you can help other people. And that's an incredible feeling. And so that allowed me to kind of view things in a more positive light. Even though there were all these negative things happening around me, I could stop some of that negative and I could help people and I could make a difference in their lives. And that's what motivates me every single day. And that's why I love public service, why I love this job in particular, and why, God willing, I'll be able to keep doing it for a while.
Dr. Stewart?
So to piggyback on that, We know that you have an accomplished past, and we are grateful that you are here in the present to share with us a little bit. So what are your ideas and focus prayerfully for the future as far as being in this office?
Keep helping people. Specifically, and I'm a little bit of a disadvantage because so much of the work I do is secret. I can't talk about what's coming down the pike, but I'll just tell you, there's a lot of environmental justice issues that we're going to be talking about, you're going to be hearing about. We've got a lot of poor communities in Pennsylvania who can't turn on their tap and drink their water because of fracking companies here in Pennsylvania. You're going to be hearing a lot more about that. You're going to hear me continue to do the work to protect people's health care. We're in court right now defending the Affordable Care Act. You're going to continue to see me taking on the most powerful organizations and interests on the planet to protect people, from corrupt public officials to multinational corporations that are taking advantage of our seniors and consumers and others. So there's a lot more work we got to do. Right now, we got to make sure that we've got an election that everybody has faith in, back to where this conversation started. Make sure that we've got proper and just result, whoever wins, and that our country can move forward from this election process and hopefully be in a position where we can start healing and solving some of these broader problems like we've talked about today, criminal justice reform and many other things that I have worked hard on and will continue to work hard on.
Again, we certainly want to thank you so much for spending this hour with us. It's been enriching and rewarding, and our best is still for you. I want to also take the opportunity to thank our wonderful audience for sharing with us. This Fireside Chat is something we do every Thursday at 12 noon. Next Thursday, we will be sharing with Senator Colette, as she will also come and share with us about this political process. Our Eternal General is here as we are about to celebrate our 132nd church anniversary. Wow. So he's part of our history. And this Sunday, my pastor, the Reverend Dr. Albert Franklin Campbell, will be bringing the word at a 9 a.m. service. And then I will bring the word at our 7 o'clock Sunday evening with the pastor. And so this is an historical event, and once again, we are grateful that our Eternal General is part of the history of this congregation, not just today, but on many occasions he's been here to share with us. He's done today. So again, on behalf of our entire congregation, we want you to know that we appreciate you, we love you, and I'm going to ask Reverend Tripline to close out in prayer, ask God's covering upon you as you move across the stage.
Thank you.
Let us pray. Eternal God, we just thank you for the beauty experienced in this hour. We thank you for Josh. We thank you for his life and his life of service. In all that he's doing, we know that he is traveling across the state, making his case to many peoples in many different counties, many different walks of life. Pray, God, that even in the work that he's doing and even through this election time, that you will just comfort his spirit, settle his spirit, give him what he stands in need of. We're thankful for not just his public service, but who he is as a man of faith for his family. And I pray, God, that you will give them what they stand in need of and help them to be able to hold on through this difficult time in which we're in. We know that from our conversation that the issues that he sees on a day-to-day basis weighs on him in his own soul, even beyond the requirements of his position. But we know that even in this, that there are more than just him and his office that are concerned about these issues, and that we hope that regardless of the results of the election, that we will all band together and bear that weight together. We thank you for our opportunity just to put this before your people and for our own collective efforts together to better the world in which we all live. It is in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.